Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Pinch of Salt, presented here by Salty Runback, where we'll be breaking down each of the 10 NACL teams in the 10 days leading up to the NACL season beginning. Once again, I'm Grapes alongside Hawk. The Salty Runback crew is back for another year, and we're going to start things off with a new show and a new twist on breaking down each of these rosters before Challengers starts this season.
Grapes, new season, new apartment. You're in a hotel room. What could be better than this, man? I mean, we got so much to talk about. As you said, going through each and every NACL team leading up to the start of the season. 10 teams, 10 days, and a whole lot to talk about. And starting with, as you can see on our screen, right, we got Wildcard, who... Grapes, you know, why are we starting with Wildcard? We put out a little poll recently, perhaps.
Yep, we had a power rankings poll, came out a couple of days ago. A lot of you filled it in. I think we got over 35 responses, which power ranked all of the rosters coming into the 2024 season. So if you're mad at us for power ranking Wildcard 10th, it wasn't us. It was you.
Neither
guys
of us
that
filled it
did
out.
that.
We have our power rankings under wraps, not to be revealed
And you'll never
at
know.
this current time.
As you can see here, Wildcard average rank in the fan poll was 8.27. That was the lowest out of the 10 teams. We'll be going from the bottom and every day making our way a little bit higher up until we get to what you guys think is the best team in Challengers for 2024. But let's start talking about Wildcard a little bit, Hawk, because they had a bit of a wild season in 2023. A new addition to the Challengers League, of course, is one of these affiliate organizations that are not associated with one of those LCS teams. Finished around middle of the pack, both splits, but had wild ups and downs. Were known for their crazy drafts, their big win streaks, their big lose streaks. However, a lot of that's going to look different this season, as you can see on our graphic here, as all 5 players are going to be swapped out.
Yeah, Wildcard going a completely different direction this split, right? I mean, they had a very interesting 2023, like you said, their first split in the Challengers League. But of course, anyone who's watched amateur, semi-pro for the last few years, they know who Wildcard is. This is one of the most prestigious organizations that we have at this level of play. So it makes sense to see them here. And they took a lot of risks last year, and a lot of them panned out pretty damn well. And even though they didn't finish at the very, very top, they looked really good. And now this year, maybe the risk is that they're going a completely different direction, right? 5 collegiate players, 4/5 of St. Louis University, now playing for Wildcard. That's crazy.
A lot of players who have played with each other in the past. You mentioned the 4 out of 5 from SLU. Also, you have Quacker, Winnie, and Darkwings, who are on the AoE team in spring 2023. Quacker just joining for that promotion
Just for promotion tournament, yeah.
Yeah, and then, you know, just a ton of collegiate synergy, kind of moved together. Quacker and Winnie also a part of Wildcard in 2021, back alongside, now, once again, their current GM in Myra. So a lot of loop back around here for this roster. However, that was back in the day in Tier 3. This team is now in Tier 2. And Hawk, overall, what are we expecting out of this Wildcard team?
I mean, it's so hard to say. Like, I feel like, you know what I can say I'm expecting, because I don't want to give like my predictions for the split, right? We'll do that later. But I feel like what I can expect from this Wildcard team is a lot of aggression, because they have a lot of players that like to get up in your face and like to make plays, right? Quacker, Winnie in particular, 2 of the players that like to do that. And I feel like we should maybe just go down the line, talk about each of these players individually, right? Because Quacker, starting with him, had a really good split on Supernova, which was a team that struggled a lot. I think he individually made a lot of really great plays. Supernova won some games because of what Quacker was able to do on his own in the top lane. And to me, Grapes, he's someone that can go toe-to-toe with any of the top laners in the league.
Oh, 100%. And you know, you mentioned Winnie and Darkwings, who were a strong 2v2 in the NACL last season. Winnie, of course, stepping aside and going into summer, with Darkwing staying put on AoE. But I think both of them had very solid years, and coming into another season where they can perform pretty well. And then some question marks here in the bottom lane with Aaron and Doxa. Doxa being a role swap from mid lane back to support, was actually still in the NACL just a year ago on TSM Challengers, but now, of course, in a new position. And Aaron, of course, you could say first split as a starter in the NACL. He had to E-sub onto CLG Faith about halfway through the season, but this is the team that he will be getting his first like real opportunity on a Tier 2 roster that he was intended to be a part of. So that's a good thing.
I do feel like this bottom lane is where I have some question marks. I mean, Graves, obviously you have some question marks about it too. We can talk about them in a minute, but I do want to take just that little bit more time to talk about Winnie and Darkwings, because these are two players that have played together before multiple times, right? Both now on St. Louis. They played together in spring 2023, and they've also played against each other for even longer, right? They have been on some of the most storied organizations in amateur. I mean, Winnie, a part of Wildcard Royalty, the Wildcard Red roster that went the distance. You've got Darkwings, who was on AOB back in 2021 at the same time, as well as Zoos. Like, there's a lot of overlap with these players, and both of them bring so much experience, and I like the way that they play the game together as well. Because Winnie, he adds that aggression. We talk about Quacker and Winnie being the players that are going to be in your face. I think Darkwings facilitates that so well, and both of these solo laners give him an avenue, Winnie, to play through and really start to get some advantages for his lanes.
And I think there actually are a lot of things that we can talk about in terms of how this team is going to play the game, because we've seen these four players, specifically Winnie, Darkwings, Aaron, and Doxa, play together just a couple of months ago at the Immortals Winter Showcase, and the core three of them for even longer back to 66 and HughFest. The name of the game with this team and with these three players, or with these 3 or 4 players, this St. Louis core, is that Winnie will go and try to get Aaron very fed and then try to have him carry the game through bot side. A lot of the time, that's actually worked very well. Aaron has looked very strong late game team fights when he's able to get these advantages and get ahead and carry late. But I think a lot of the time where we saw these teams falter, when you talk about St. Louis, would be with all the attention going bot side, who's up in the top lane being able to hold things down. You mentioned Quacker there being a very solid piece, but Vital last year in that collegiate season did struggle a little bit when put on that island. And so I really like the addition of Quacker here, a very solid soul laner who will be able to hold his own. We saw at the Immortal Showcase when Zamudo was there alongside the rest of these guys. That was the first tournament that Slew was finally able to win. And I think this is a very similar formula that I'm hoping works well for this squad.
I think there's no coincidence that they were able to win Immortals when they had a top laner like Zamudo. And Quacker, I mean, he's got big shoes to fill. He's now replacing Zamudo in this top lane, not just from for Wildcard, but also in a way for St. Louis coming off that win at Immortals. So he's got to be able to play to that level. And I don't know if I'll be sold. Like I said, Quacker can go toe-to-toe with anyone, but I consider Zamudo to be one of the top prospects in the top lane in NACL. So Quacker, big shoes to fill. But that just really leaves the last couple players to talk in depth about. Aaron and Doxa, right? We already mentioned them. There might be some struggles down there. And now Slew, as it has been for the last couple years, even as far as during 2023 when Winnie played together with Aaron as his AD carry in their top 4 run, a lot of it was about the bot lane. A lot of it was about Winnie playing around this lane and trying to generate super crazy early leads, right? Early dives, early ganks. But my concern does lie. I do think individually, Aaron and Doxa are going to struggle. We have not seen the Doxa that was Doxa diffing people back in 2021 and early 2022. And now with the role swap to support, I'm not really sure if we'll see that again. And maybe he will end up being a great support. We know what this player is capable of. But alongside Aaron, someone who, I'm just going to be honest, Graves, I'm not super sold on Aaron's abilities at this level. I'm a little bit concerned for this bottom lane when they're not getting that attention from Winnie, right? And players like Quacker and like Darkwings, yes, they can create their own advantages and they can hold their own, but Quacker's going to want to play aggressive, right? He's going to want to play up. He's going to want to call Winnie over. So I'm worried about in the 2v2s, if this bot lane's not getting bailed out, are they going to be able to stay alive?
I do want to give Aaron some credit. I feel like when he was on CLG Faith, he was one of the stronger players on that team, even though he was working as a sub. Felt like he had to make a lot of plays, went very aggressive in laning phase, was able to pick up a ton of 2v2 kills, and again, has looked good at this collegiate level, and we'll see how well that translates back again to the NACL. And for Doxa, the Immortal Showcase was the only time that we've really seen him play support. And from what we saw on social media, that was the first time he
Yeah, that's
really
true.
got to play support at all as well. And so
And
with another couple of months of experience, getting to play at this level, both in CLOL and in NACL, I think Dox is a player, in a role like the support position where there's not a ton of mechanics, a lot of game knowledge and just awareness and decision making, that he, I think, has the chance to thrive in. Although
right.
I think I agree with you where their bot lane is the biggest question mark going into the year.
And I think that is the biggest question that needs to be answered is whether or not Dox is able to live up. Because the 2v2s were rough at the Immortals Winter Showcase. But, if Doxo was really first timing support, I mean, maybe he does get a lot better. And maybe it does end up being good. Aaron, I feel like at this point, and from what we've seen, is something of a known quantity in that I think he will do his job when he is able to, but the level of competition is going to be very, very, very high. Especially Grapes, we've talked about marksman in particular being stacked in Challengers League this year. We've got some damn good bot lanes. Dox is going to be able to level up at support, help keep Aaron afloat, and give this team a win condition through the bottom lane.
Yeah, I mean, last thing I want to mention as well, I believe a lot of these players will be kind of on campus at St. Louis, as far as I'm aware.
True.
And I think that is a pretty big advantage. I think something we're going to continue to talk about here throughout the season is that this year, most of the NACL teams will not be in person together. They won't be in LA competing. A lot of them will be remote. The exceptions are the kind of these collegiate cores. You have Winthrop in the qualifiers, but then Maryville and Wildcard here will kind of have a bit of an advantage in that way. I do think it is an advantage to kind of be able to see your teammates, interact with them on a day-to-day basis. And we'll see if it affects Wildcard as much as it does SLU, because you kind of have this interesting dynamic where it's like 4 of the collegiate teammates and then kind of 1 extra player. So I am interested to see how that one goes.
Areas of concern, though, for Wildcard. I'm a little bit worried about what's going to happen if this team falls behind. We talked about this team's going to want to play aggressive. They're going to want to play in your face. They're going to want to get advantages. But we already talked about the concerns that we had with bottom lane, and I'm worried that if Winnie's not able to get something going, and Quacker was someone that was so well renowned for, when he gets his champs and he gets his matchup, he can win. But he also struggled a little bit when he wasn't able to do that. I worry that this team will fall flat if their early game plans don't go their way.
I do remember that was a concern that we had about AoE 2023, though, as well. Like
That's
back
true.
in the spring split, when we had Winnie and Darkwings together, definitely something that we were talking about. Can they kind of keep it together? And I feel like they actually kind of transitioned from being that early game team towards the end of the split, becoming a very strong team fighting team. So I still have some faith in them being able to kind of keep that up. And, my main concern, I think, is kind of just the bot lane and how they're going to be able to do, as we mentioned earlier. But last thing we got to do, Hawk, before we close out this episode is taking a look at where we ranked. Obviously, on average, all you guys rank them on average 10th. Do we think that this is a adequate rank, or do they deserve to be a little bit higher? We normally do higher, lower, but there's not much lower to go than 10th.
There's not much lower. Unless what would lower be like guaranteed relegation. Although maybe if you're putting them 10th, you think that anyway. Grapes, I think this one is in the Goldilocks zone. I'm going to be real. I think this team has some exciting prospects. I think that the core of 4 from SLU is very, very good, and they have some players that I'm excited about. I just feel like when you put it all together, and especially the concerns that I have about their bottom lane, this to me, and with how strong the NACL is as well, that's an important part. The competition is, to me, feels higher for this split than it did last split. I'm just very worried for a team like this. I feel like they just don't quite have the individual talent, and I worry that they'll be at the bottom of the standings.
I'd wager to maybe feel a little bit optimistic about this team, and the reason for that is because I think their floor is very high. I think we've seen them play at a high level with this core of players, and of course Quacker on its little top lane island going to do just fine as well, in my opinion. I think there isn't too much to go higher, so I would say maybe like a little bit higher would where I would put my power rankings. The problem is, I think as we're going to see as we progress through this series, is there really aren't any bottom feeders in the league this year, as we might have seen back in the spring split last year with some of the LCS affiliates that were full of a lot of newer pieces. It feels like this league is very competitive this season, and there's just going to have to be one team towards the bottom, and according to the fans, that will be wild card. And it seems like, in general, we're not opposed to that idea. Although I would not be surprised to see this team go on a run and make the top half, as I think I could say about any team that we're going to be talking about over these next 10 days.
You know, Grapes, I'll be the bad guy. I think I would be surprised if they made a run for the top half, but who knows? Maybe they can do it. But I don't know. That's our little breakdown on Wildcard. Let us know what you think. Obviously, the community seems to agree that this one might be a little bit lower. But let us know what you think about the players. Let us know what you think about the roster. All of our social media at Salty Runback Pod. Grapes, unless you got anything else, stay tuned for the next episode, releasing one each day, 10 days leading up. We still got 9 more teams to break down. Don't miss it.
See you tomorrow.